Hi, this is lesson number 10th. So in the lesson number 9th, in the previous lesson we discussed some basic information about Horace and what were the conditions in Rome. So moving further in the series of literary criticism, this is lesson number 10th, and in this we shall discuss about his famous work, that is Ars Poetica. Ars Poetica. This work is title Ars Poetica means art of poetry. Poetica means poetry and ars means art. So what is the art of poetry? He is telling us. This work is written in three parts, means it contains three parts. So we shall discuss about them. But first, as a brief introduction to this work, it is written in hexameter. Ars Poetica is written in hexameter and it is written in the form of letters. So we can say that it is an epistolary work. And to whom it is written? It is written to a Roman senator. The name was Lucius Calpurnius Piso. And this work is translated into English because it was written in Latin. So it was in Rome and written in Latin, and later it was translated into English by the Elizabethan dramatist Ben Jonson. And so far as the theme is concerned, it is modeled on Aristotle's principle of literary criticism. We have studied Aristotle, what he used to think about literature and writings. So he also followed the same principles. As I told you that when Horace was in Rome at that time, the Greek literature was also flourishing in Rome. People started reading Greek literature. So that is why the impact of Aristotle's philosophy and thinking was there in the mind of Horace. So now we shall discuss about its parts. It has three parts. The first is the poiesis. About poiesis means the subject matter, what should be the content. And the second one is the poema, means about the forms, structure. And then the third one is the poeta, about a good poet or good poetry. So first in poiesis, what is there? Now we discuss about poiesis. What Aristotle used to think, the same is followed by Horace. So he is saying that poetry is not mere imitation, it is a creative process. Like Aristotle, he says that it is a creative work, it is a imaginative recreation as well, we can say. It is something like that you are producing something new out of old. You have something old in your hand, maybe something, any work, even if you have in your hand, or you have something as a vision in your mind that is old, and now you are producing something new. That is the creativity, or that is also called as the recreation. So in whichever way you call, he is just favoring that the poetry is a good work. It is imaginative recreation. And for this he says that the poetry has to be all the way good. If you have a long poem of 20 lines or 200 lines, it has to be completely good. It can't be that the some portion of the poetry is good, some is bad, and we say that okay, these 10 lines are good and the rest is no. According to him, a good poetry is that is all the way consistent and completely good, completely admirable. And for this he also used a term like purple patch, as we use in our daily life. Purple patch means the period of a success or of a good period. So for poetry he says that the poetry has to be completely good, entirely good, not some part of it. And for this he says that the language has to be much better than the common language, much higher than the common language, but has to be understandable. We talk with one another, and we talk with the very plain and common simple language. But in poetry there has to be the language of a style, of a class, of a caliber. And for this he gave one example, that the word choice should also be of a something of a better level, not the common words just using as it is. A writer should choose the word perfectly, and he gives an analogy of a tree, that in a tree you see that every year's leaves are coming, new leaves are coming and then falling, and again new leaves are coming. Similarly, he is saying that in literature the new words are coming, and who is supposed to create the new words? Poets, writers. They are supposed to create such new words. So they are supposed to create new words, then these new words will come into the society and people start using it. Then these words become obsolete by the time, and then again new words will be coined by the poets. So it is the duty of a poet to coin new words and should be used in the poetry. And those new words has to be good words and understandable as well, because it shouldn't be like that these words are so difficult, and poetry, even in the language the poetry is so difficult that one is not able to understand. It shouldn't be like that. It has to be understandable, and the language has to be of a class, and the words has to be much better than the common dialect that is between the common people. No, it has to be of a class. And further, it is he's saying about moderation. Moderation means that the imagination, whatever the poet is having in the poetry, it has to be of a moderate level, not so high, not so low. Means the concept, whatever is given in the poem, it has to be of moderate level so that one could easily understand. But it shouldn't be like that the concept in the poetry is given that is far deeper, and one is not able to understand. It shouldn't be like that, because it will hurt the audience then. Then further he's saying that the genre should stick, one should stick to the genre. The poet should follow the genre according to the poem. Like in epic poem, he says that iambic pentameter should be used for tragedies, iambic verse, or when someone is complaining or making excuses or allegations, whatever we say. When someone is complaining, we can say elegiac verse should be used. So on the whole, we can say that he is saying that whatever one should write, it should be of a level. Secondly, the words should be much better than the common language. Whatever we use in the common language, they should be of a bit higher level. And then in the another segment, that is the poema, in that he says that how should be the structure of the poem. In poetry, what should be the structure? For this, he is saying that first the content has to be of familiar things. When you see that the poetry has to be of old stories, I think this is a better way to understand that whenever we hear or listen to the stories in the form of poetry, which are based on the old stories, old myth, whichever we already know, then it becomes easy for the audience to understand. So he simply says that whatever is the content in the poetry, it has to be based on the familiar things, especially with the past things or past stories which are there in the culture. And then he says that the most important point, as we see in the most of the epics, that it should start with media res. This is very important point. Media res means it should start in the middle. Most of the time, you may have noticed in the movies that these movies are starting in the middle. When the opening scene comes, we are given in a situation that so much is happened already, and then when we go by the action, then we come to the backlash or in the background that what happened. So similar thing has to be there. As you read Iliad or Odyssey, in Iliad you see that it is starting in media res, and when it starts, most of the action, you can say 20%, 30% of the whole plot is already happened. And when you go by the reading or by listening, and then you come to know what happened in the past, it was revealed. And how it is revealed? It is revealed through some background information, or how it is revealed that what happened by a character as his memory, or revealing the past incidents, whichever may be the form, may be the narrative form, but it should start in media. Another is that in the poetry, there are two type of things. One is that is performed in the on the stage, and other is that is just narrated. But before going further, I would again like to remind you that the poetry here, it does not mean that just poetry, because here there is no prose work. Poetry means everything. Like drama was there at that time, so it was also in the form of poetry. So everything he's saying, it is equally applied to drama as well, tragedy as well, which were there at that time. So he's saying that there are two type of thing. One are narrated, and other are like which are not narrated but performed by the actions. So he says that there has to be at least a distinction between them. The scenes like as you know that in Julius Caesar there are wars, but such wars are just narrated on the stage. Even in other plays, when there is any war scene in Macbeth, these incidents or these events are just narrated or reported on the stage. If someone is murdered, it is just narrated on the stage that someone is murdered. Not such scenes are performed on the stage. Maybe anything could be the reason, like any that scene is not possible to be performed on the stage, or maybe the bloodshed or any such horrifying thing. The writers think that it is not easy or it is not worthy to show on the stage. So whatever may be the reason, but it is said that there should be distinction between these two things. Which are worth performing should be performed, and which are not worth performing, they should be narrated on the stage. And then one more thing he says, that there shouldn't be more than 5 acts in any tragedy or in any okay, comedy you can also include that. In that there shouldn't be more than 5 acts, and in single scene 3 characters are enough. Not more than 3 characters in a single scene, and overall there shouldn't be more than 5 acts. 5 acts are enough to complete it. And further he says that in most of the ancient work, we see that the god is there to make such intervention whenever it is required. So Horace advocates that God has to be there to punish or to bring justice in some situation when there is no possible chance for the writer to create that possible. And in that sense, he may go to God, or go to God in a sense that he may introduce any event like that God is coming and giving punishment to the devil or evil and bringing justice. God is coming to help the main character or the protagonist or the hero. Such interventions should be there, but only when there is no possibility of getting solution other ways. So a writer can use the God's intervention whenever required, but only when there is no other way possible. And then we come to the last segment, and that is named as the Poeta. Here he makes a very important point that whenever a poet writes something, he shouldn't go for publishing it immediately. Just imagine if you have written something as the work of art, you think that it is good that you have written something as on the basis of your experiences. Okay, write it, keep it with you. And he says that you should keep it at least for 10 years or so. Okay, maybe 10 years or maybe means a longer time you should keep it with you. And after that period, you should publish that. And when you publish that, you would be reading again, and at that time there is every possibility, there is a somewhat possibility, of course, that your views might change. Today you are saying that this is good, okay, write it down, and after 10 years or so you again read that line, and when you are supposed to publish that, now you are publishing it in the public domain, and that time you might find that your views at that time were not right. Even we can make such judgments with ourselves. What we used to believe 10 years before, are we believing the same thing? Do we have the same type of attitude or the same type of perception about the things as we used to have 10 years before? No. By the time our feelings get changed. So that is why he says that one should not publish a poem or work, at least wait for at least 10 years or so, then publish it. And further, he talks about, he introduced a Latin term, that is dulce et utile. Not familiar words to us. Dulce et utile. It is about the function of the poetry. He says that poetry has two functions, that is to teach and delight. Poetry teaches, gives us moral lessons, and also give us pleasure, delight. We feel pleasure by reading poetry. So the meaning of these two words can be taken as sweet and useful. Sweet means it is giving us delight, and useful means it is giving us some lessons and some teachings. And then further he compares poetry to painting and says that both are almost the similar things. If a painter draws some paintings and writer is writing a poem, and both are quite the similar work, there is not much to choose between them, and for that he uses the term ut pictura poesis. These are all Latin terms. Ut pictura poesis. These terms I am just talking here because these are asked in net, so that is why I am just mentioning here. Otherwise I do think that mentioning of such things uh, is not good, because when we are reading literature or we are reading literary things for the purpose of enjoyment and pleasure, that time these things becomes too awkward and too boring for ourselves. So you may notice and note down in your notebook if you find it worth remembering. And then further he says that if someone has written something and you find faults in that, one should ignore it. I have written something and you find faults in that, and you should ignore those faults. There can be flaws even in the greatest works in the history. Like we have the great works of Homer. He takes the example of Homer. He has written Iliad and Odyssey. Even we can find faults in his work, Iliad and Odyssey, but still we say that we love Homer because of his great work, and so much is there in his work. So he says that such minor faults to be ignored. We should ignore such minor faults. And at last he also says for himself as well that one should also forgive him, as he says for himself that I am not the most original. I am just as I am or as I am inspired. I am not the most original. And he calls himself, he mocks himself by saying that even there can be flaws in me, as he says. So, on the whole, he says that we should just enjoy the poetry, for it should teach us and it gives us pleasure, delight, and painting is compared with poetry, and both are almost the same thing, as he says. And the most important point, as I made in Poeta, that one should publish his work only after 10 years, after writing 10 years. And then we have several points on the basis of the previous year questions. Uh, these are just the main points you can take. The most important, Ars Poetica is written by Horace, and dulce et utile, the term belongs to Horace, and it means to teach and to delight. And then the last one is again that term I mentioned, at pictura poesis. This is uh, for as in painting, so as in poetry. Means painting and poetry both are almost the same thing, or of a same caliber, of a same class and quality. So these were the three main segments of Ars Poetica written by Horace. So that's enough for this lesson, and we shall further continue with the next literary critic. So for the moment, I say you goodbye. Thanks.